first like to introduce our panel. Just welcome up to the stage. We have Peter Hunt, the Vice President of Sales for SCW. Peter. Thank you. And Heather Herndon-Wright, Director of Supply Chain Diversity and Sustainability at Vistra Corp. Thank you for being together, Heather. Frank Villarreal, the Senior Vice President of U.S. Capital. Please come on up. And the one and only Frankie McDermott, Chief Operating Officer of SMUD. Thank you, everyone. You can have a seat. And we have an interesting mix today, and obviously ESG is a buzzword, and from greenwashing, and you can hear it. There's all types of triggers that happen when you say that word in today's society. But what we have today here is just an amazing group of technology providers from SCW. We have practitioners on the utility side, and then we have the capital investment side. So really looking to dig into this conversation and hopefully have some time for questions here. But first off, just want to get started. We'll start with Frankie down the end. Just a little about yourself, and make sure you throw in there what makes you super weird, Frankie.
You can probably answer.
Lots to discuss.
Oh, I forgot, yeah. The differentiation, Frankie, and then Frank. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Jason. I'm Frankie McDermott. I'm Chief Operating Officer with SMUD. I'm coming up on 20 years with SMUD and had a career in semiconductors before that. And I think the topic of ESG was poignant to me when I went from semiconductors to the utility business. I had moved here from Ireland in '89, so I'll give you the very quick version. But I really wasn't part of Sacramento when in my prior career, and I really felt like I became a Sacramentan, absorbed by the SMUD culture that is kind of had ESG long before ESG was there. That's not to boast about it, it's the DNA of SMUD. But anyway, I used to be Chief Customer Officer before this, so I think I have a perspective on the customer as well.
And the weird part?
Oh, I grew up on punk rock music and play it very loudly in my car on the way to work sometimes.
Oh, I like that. I got the visual too there. So Frank.
I'm Frank Villarreal, Senior Vice President with U.S. Capital Global. Our firm focuses on emerging growth companies that require capital up to $700 million. We also focus on impact-oriented investments, project finance, and real estate transactions as well.
Thank you. And Heather?
Nothing weird about you?
Oh, yes. You need to know that.
I am a professionally trained chef, so I'm the chef of the family, and I like to wrench on cars, so just swapped out my wife's brake caliper in her Range Rover last week.
And you skateboard, which is so cool.
And I ride an electric skateboard to work on occasion.
Oh, you got to get that. Sarah Catering for next events. We have another candidate there, Frank.
I was going to say, you need to auction them off.
Oh, yeah.
You can make more money that way. I'm Heather Herndon-Wright. I'm Director of Supply Chain Diversity and Sustainability at Vistra Corporation. I'll explain a little bit about Vistra for those that you don't know us. We're an electric generator and a retail electric provider. We're not a utility. We've got about 55 power plants across 12 different states, and then about 16 different brands, U.S. Gas and Electric, TXU Energy, Ambit, several others, across 19 states in the District of Columbia. We have no transmission and distribution, so this has been a very educational conference for me to really hear the T&D side of it. So I've led supply chain diversity and sustainability at Vistra for about 14 years, been in supplier diversity for about 33 now, and really thought taking on supply chain sustainability just from a resource standpoint. We don't have enough for supplier diversity, let alone to really do justice to supply chain sustainability. But it does involve a lot of the same efforts, so that's why it makes sense for it to be there. So I took it on about 2.5 years ago, have been growing that, and have really loved it, enjoyed it. I have a great team, and may have some openings soon in case anybody's looking. So I'll look forward to meeting more people here. And then my crazy weird thing, other than, like, you see the headshot here, because I think y'all took it from my LinkedIn. I've absolutely got to update that. This is my COVID-liberated platinum hair, right? Platinum, not gray, but platinum. And I have a daughter who's 39, 4 kids, and she has purple hair.
All right, Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Hunt. I'm with SCW, which stands for Smart Energy Water. We are not an energy drink. We are a vendor in the industry supplying SaaS-based solutions exclusively to utilities, which, so we've got over 400 utility customers, electric, water, gas, and starting to branch out into some cellular and propane distribution markets as well. Been with the company for about 2 years. I manage sales up in the northeast part of the United States. Been in the industry about 15 years, doing AMI deployments and working for AMI and metering vendors before this. And I guess what attracted me to SEW is really this this whole explosion of all the data and what are utilities going to really do to get a return on that investment. And so we're doing some pretty interesting applications. I don't know how interesting, it's not really cool. All right, it's an uncool thing, but about myself. I've recently taken up the hobby of restoring wooden boats. And I am going to a wooden boat school this summer. As my daughter said, "Dad, you're going to a sleepover camp?" I said, "Yep." So that's going to be my hobby.
That sounds great. Well, thank you all. So Heather, let's just dive right in, and I'll go straight to it. So how do we carry out ESG goals beyond investment strategy and meaningful action and accountability? And for the other panelists, I know you guys have thoughts on that, so after Heather goes, we'd love to hear your thoughts too.
So I know at Vistra, it definitely is more than just, it was investor initiated, I think. Well, actually, it wasn't even that. We have actually had, because we are kind of doing things in that space anyway from a sustainability effort, we had committed to Vistra Zero, I don't know, probably 5-6 years ago, started producing a sustainability report. We, like many of the rest of you in this room, are transitioning our fleet from coal and fossil fuels to solar and renewables. We have the largest battery storage facility in the world in Moss Landing, California right now at 750 megawatts, going up to 1,500. And we're converting a lot of our, well, all of our coal facilities to solar and battery storage. So we've had that commitment there. We're acting on it. It's being implemented. It's showing to be profitable for us as well. And so it really is a business decision. It's something that we know is not only the right thing to do, which we're committed to doing, but it's the best thing to do for our business solutions. It's customer driven. Our customers, we supply Toyota and Pepsi and the door-to-door residential customers as well all across. We've got a little over 5 million customers. So we are really looking to be really supporting our communities where we live, where we work, and making sure that we're reflecting those values and where they want us to put our money and where they want to put their money. So it's really very recycled for us, recycled dollars. It just makes business sense.
Thanks, Jason. I think I'll give some context. Maybe people who don't know who SMUD is, we're in Sacramento, California. We cover about 900 square miles. Count everything in meters and utilities, about 670,000 meters, serving 1.5 million customers. And we have our own elected board, so we're not part of a city, we're not part of a county. Our own elected board, which I think some of them are here, but I can't see in the light, so thanks for supporting ETS as well. We tend to, I use that as a point to speak about alignment across our organization. And SMUD has been around for over 70 years. And sometimes I talk about this and say, anybody can sell electrons, but we're very, very focused on our customers and community. We even have a tagline that talks about improving the lives of our customers and community, and that drives us in our programs. And as you've heard, we've targeted a zero carbon emissions from our power sources by 2030. We can't do that alone. So our ESG actions are extremely targeted. Now I'll talk about it maybe a little further along, but we have a long history of exceeding goals before they were imposed upon us, like the 20% renewables in California some time ago. We recently, J.D. Power awarded us a Sustainability Leader Award, the first ever for us, and I think it was their first ever also. That was for 2022. And then the CDP, a global environmental rating company that they used to be called the Carbon Disclosure Project. They work with 13,000 companies, recently rated us as an A-. That was in the top 6% of companies for sustainability. So even with that, we feel like we have to do an awful lot more. And we created something in 2018 as a response to the Brookings Institute report that rated Sacramento in economic vitality and prosperity in the bottom third of 100 metropolitan regions in the U.S. So we responded by creating our Sustainable Communities Initiative, which was really saying you can do a lot as an energy company, but what about all of the other players in the region? And we looked at lots of different demographic information around air quality, education, transportation, electricity. A lot of the power plants are in under-resourced areas, and we created this map. You can see this on our website, and we use that as a basis to target our customers and meet them where they are and create programs, and are really it's fundamentally based in equity, that we call ourselves a powerful partner for an inclusive zero carbon economy. And we really mean that in how we bring everybody along instead of being hard-nosed about you must participate. And as you know, I'm making this a very long answer, but I feel very passionately about this. A lot of people can participate in the zero carbon economy if they have the money, but there's an awful lot of people who don't even have the time to think about it. So we've worked, I'll speak maybe a little later about partnerships that we've created locally to really make the biggest impact that we can.
Thank you. And Frank, coming from the capital investment side, and something we hear a lot about, and greenwashing, and how that's incorporated a big part of the lexicon that you have to work in. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you see that impacting your work and maybe the portfolio companies and partners you work with?
Sure. So I think the first step in the topic of greenwashing is to really define what green is. And I think the first step in really addressing any problem is to measure it. So what is green? Is nuclear power green? If you're in the UK, the answer would be yes. Nuclear power is green. The UK has a roster known as the green taxonomy list that they have included nuclear energy as part of being an acceptable type of industry to invest in, that investors can refer to this roster and say, yes, this is a green company. So I think defining what green is the first step, and then subsequent to that, being able to measure it.
All right, so Peter, that tees that up perfectly for you, being from that talking about the data and how you leverage it. How are you seeing customers leverage data to really drive action when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, I think a lot of our approach is to really try to meet customers where they are. And there are customers who are cutting edge technology, those that aren't. There's still my mother who prefers to get a phone call. But the whole spectrum is really, how do you set up one system that we're able to meet the customers where they are? So we take a lot of pride in the way we try to communicate, using one platform, notifications to customers. One of the recent examples is our chatbot, and we really developed that chatbot specifically for the utility industry. It's not a generic FAQs. It's really trying to address questions which are typically found in the industry. Using AI, these chatbots get smarter and smarter as you start ingesting more and more information about the responses. And a good example is one of our customers. They were able to get 90% of the calls addressed on chat through query, and then accompanied with that was I think a 60% deflection in call volume to the call center. So that's really, I think, how we use technology and really reaching out to the customers.
Fantastic. Heather, I wanted to pivot just from the comment we've made, just getting introduced to you. So could you maybe explain that context here when you said preaching to churches? But I think that really relates to how the conversation has changed, just in reflection that you're having this conversation to an audience that's typically not your audience. Would you mind expanding on that?
Yeah, I was talking to Jason about, I speak on a lot of panels in a lot of places constantly, but they're typically diversity-related panels or even sustainability-specific panels. Just a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, I spoke to a working capital leadership conference on DE&I, sustainability, supply chain diversity, and how we wrap that into our overall delivery of our services. And it was great for me because I'm getting outside of the church, I'm preaching to others, but at the same time, I'm out of the echo chamber, right? I'm hearing other things that I don't usually hear. And it enables me to then go back and implement and take some of the ideas that I'm hearing here into our supply chain sustainability, our supply chain diversity, our sustainability organization. And it lets me see, too, that across the industry, sometimes it feels like we're screaming and nobody's really hearing it, because it kind of, we're kind of known, particularly in the supplier diversity world, we walk in the room, everybody scatters, because they want to keep their same companies. They want to use the same suppliers they've always used. And I get that. We all get that. You want to work with people you know, you like, and you trust. You've just got to get outside of that comfort zone and really meet new people, new suppliers, new alternate sources, and you can find out there's a whole lot more innovation out there. Even though you may not know exactly how it's going to get there, if you spend the time, effort, and energy, they can be just as reliable as your existing supply base. Same thing with suppliers that implement sustainability practices, particularly in the electric generation space, right? We've got scopes 1, 2, and 3. Well, we're covering 1, we're looking at 2, but scope 3 is like a giant octagonal Rubik's Cube, not just 4 sides, we got 8 of them. And really trying to figure out how we're going to track, how we're going to measure. Are we even looking at the right metrics? Going back to your point on what is green, right? So we're part of, it's called it used to be the Electric Utility Sustainable Supply Chain Alliance. They have shortened it now to just the Sustainable Supply Chain Alliance, but it's made up of all the electric companies. And it's looking at scope 3. How do we identify the suppliers, the right metrics for our suppliers? Right now, we're just getting them to report, really creating baselines. Who is even aware of it, who's driving it, and then trying to drive, for instance, the SEC rules. We want to make sure the rules are something we can implement, that we can actually live by. So really trying to get at the front, kind of the cutting edge. I heard somebody say the other day, we're at the cutting edge, we're not the bleeding edge, but really getting up to the front of that and trying to drive the leadership and what those metrics are going to be, what we can actually track, and what really gets us to the end result we want to get at. I remember I came out of telecom, and ISO standards are great. You get the same thing. It can be repeatable. You meet those quality standards, but you may get the same wrong product at the end of every one of those processes every time. In telecom, we created the TL9000 Quest standard. And what that did was started at the end result. What do you want the end result to be? Now let's create processes and procedures that you can repeat, that you can get to the right place at the right time every time. So I think in supply chain sustainability, not just sustainability as an electric company, but in the supply chain scope 3 portion of that's what we're trying to do right now, is really drive that. So getting outside of just our own little cocoon of people that already believe it, have drunk the Kool-Aid, and getting out and talking to others about it and seeing where you all are coming from. And I think another consistent motif I've heard here is really listening to the community. What does the community want? How are you absorbing it? How are you implementing it? How does this impact your lifestyle? And then how do we take that back into our company and implement it accordingly? So that was what that was in reference to.
Thank you. And Frankie, in terms of like the community partnerships you mentioned and being able to turn those into tangible results to help you guys along that ESG journey, can you maybe expand on some of those partnerships you were mentioning?
Yeah, I think I'll start with, I think any survey of customers, what do they care about? We can't forget about reliability and affordability. And at SMUD, we talk about that as the guardrails on our way to the journey towards zero carbon, which we haven't figured out the last 10%, by the way, just to be clear. People say, you're crazy, zero carbon. Well, why not us? That's the way we look at it. But with those guardrails of reliability and affordability, and thinking about affordability, first of all, if you compared, if our customers were on the rates of some of our neighboring utilities, the equivalent economic benefit what we would lose as an economic benefit in the Sacramento region is over $700 million. So I think fundamentally you have to be financially sound first. And then as we move forward and we want this inclusive environment, we realize we can't do it all by ourselves. So we have done very specific outreach and partnered with community organizations based on those targeted communities that we identified on our Sustainable Communities map. And they help us as SMUD ambassadors communicate our vision. We found that 52% of people we had a 52% increase in 1 year of people understanding our zero carbon plan. And of those 52%, 90% agree with the plan. So we have a real base case for bringing people along with very different solutions for each community. As an example, people said, well, that's great, but we're interested in jobs and workforce development. SMUD is only so big, we can only hire so many people, so we put a lot of investment into community training and hiring to feed our citizens, our community, our customers into technology companies, which ultimately will participate in a green energy future. So to be specific, we fund scholarships and internships into technology companies, solar providers, And we're increasing the understanding of the utility industry, obviously, but we're also feeding a sustainable workforce for SMUD ourselves. So we're trying to tie it all together from the communities all the way through to a regional approach, and not just based on SMUD's goals, but based on the region's goals. And we've had the very specific partnerships with the community partnerships address the community, but we've also partnered with the Air Quality District locally, with regional transportation, with the Council of Governments, to really focus and try to target state and federal funds to build sustainable communities in the area. So it's very targeted in terms of SMUD, and it's very broad in terms of regional approach to achieve our zero carbon future. But I'll probably say it over and over and over. We have a big equity lens on everything we do, and we're very conscious of cross-subsidization. Who's the winners? Who's the losers? And our board really takes that into account, and you'll see that if you read our strategic direction on our website. You'll see what we value, and you'll see why we value it, and you'll see how we move forward on this. And it influences, we have a lot of discussions about what's our revenue requirements, what's a rate increase, and understanding that affordability piece also. That's fundamental to maintaining the trust with our customers and really being that trusted advisor. That may be overused, but people are busy. It's hard to get the retention around zero carbon. I think we're well on the way to doing that, because it's a little scary for people as they go forward.
Thank you. And Frank, are you starting to see more opportunities in this space from innovations or companies you guys are looking to invest or partner with?
Absolutely. One of our current deals is a company called Hover Energy, and this company aggregates solar, wind, and battery technology for use in commercial and industrial applications. The Ministry of Defence in the UK is one of their customers. They've implemented one system in Liverpool, and they are about to purchase many more. So pretty notable and marquee kind of customer, I would say, that represents a move towards ESG.
Thank you. And Peter, in terms of how the customer expectations evolve, I know you've been in the industry for a while. How is that impacting this conversation?
Yeah, I think the whole definition of customer has certainly evolved. SCW has been in business for about 10 years now, and we started out first thinking of customers as residential customers, and then a segment which is kind of your C&I or commercial customers. But about 4 or 5 years ago, we realized that just wasn't enough, and we've developed applications around our base software for these different personas, whether you're a landlord or whether you're a contractor or a builder. And one of them that's germane to the ESG conversation is a persona we call agency, which is really targeted at how do you take agencies, whether they're a LIHEAP or Salvation Army or a local church, whatever, who wants to be able to help and assist an underserved portion of the market that's having customers having a tough time paying their bills, and really trying to match that up with the agencies and those customers that need the money with the utility in the middle. This really kind of took off. Really in California, we had several utilities during COVID where there were a lot of people who were having a tough time paying their bills. And the old method of, a check coming in from Salvation Army and trying to match it up to Peter Hunt's bill and saying, Peter Hunt, you can underpay by $100. I underpay my bill by $100. The check isn't paired up to my account in time. Next thing you know, I'm getting calls to threaten to shut off. So the issue is really trying to, how do you take all of the technology that's available today to make that linkage and make that experience as smooth as possible.
And Heather, I'd like to go to you with this inclusion and diversity part, right? Because that's probably been a central theme here. But it's also hard to do than the complexities of all the acronyms that especially this industry is. So how do we get that to the customer? But why do you think it's a critical part of and we really need to commit to the inclusion and diversity part, and why it's so difficult to do.
Well, I think people do business, like I said, with people they know, they trust. I heard somebody earlier this week talking about you're going to do business with people that look like you, and we find that in the minority, the women, the veteran, the LGBTQ, the disability-owned business enterprise space as well. They tend to hire more people that look like them, which is great because then you're including those communities, growing those communities, and creating economic wealth and trying to diminish that wealth gap. One of the things that we do see that's coming online now, and I think I actually heard that earlier today too, was the returning citizens or the formerly incarcerated. That's the new category that's coming up, particularly in Illinois for us, and now we're seeing it with some DOE grants, I think, in Pennsylvania, and as well as former foster care recipients or graduates of the foster care system, and looking at not only hiring individuals from those demographics, but also how do we help them create companies? How do we teach them entrepreneurship? And from an acronym standpoint, we refer to MWBEs, WBE, so minority business enterprises, ethnic minorities, and what that means is they're 51% or more owned, controlled, and operated by ethnic minorities, by women, by veterans, service-disabled veterans, LGBTQ individuals, or persons with disabilities. So those are the 5 categories today that we count as diverse. We also have a small business initiative, so we look for small and local businesses, try to provide opportunities for them to engage in our supply chain. That could be at a first tier directly with us, or at a second tier through one of our prime suppliers. But again, the intent is to create that economic wealth and diminish that wealth gap in those communities that are traditionally underutilized or disadvantaged. And I try not to use the word disadvantaged, but underutilized. They're there, they're qualified, capable, and competitive. We still expect them to be the best, and if they're not quite there, we help them get there. That's what my role is to help grow those businesses so that they can really bring the innovation, bring the cost savings. Quite frequently, we'll hit a certain utilization percentage, and our savings will exceed that utilization percentage because they are bringing greater cost savings to the business. So of all the acronyms that are out there, we are looking at 2 additional ones probably in the next couple of years that I think are going to be pervasive across all the states. That'll be the returning citizens and foster care recipients. So I think that's the initial foundation of the acronyms anyway.
Thank you. Frank, you guys do business globally. I think some of the conversations, you mentioned this global perspective, so I wanted to see if you can share how that differentiates, but it also maybe complicates what you guys are working on.
So I think that I've heard a number of people speak about this, but it seems like in Europe they're a bit farther ahead of the curve than we are here in the US. So you're starting to see that transition happening here, and I noticed that KPMG most recently started hawking their ESG reporting services. And the SEC is being petitioned to review how we're seeing investment into companies, what kind of carbon footprint those companies are having, and how investors should kind of view this. So in the UK, there is in fact a more mandated and regulatory environment where you have to be accountable as to what kind of impact your company is having in a net zero capacity. And I think the SEC right now is evaluating exactly how that will be rolled out here in the US. So there are preparations that seem to be taking place now in anticipation of that.
Thank you. And Peter, you guys do have global clients. Are you seeing some of those shifts kind of impacting the types of requests and things you're being asked to deliver to your customers from a service perspective?
Yes. I mean, in general, the whole ESG theme is prevalent across all countries. I mean, we deal with 37 countries. We like to talk about our customers in terms of the number of customers they touch, and we just crossed 1 billion customers. And I saw someplace that 1 in 3 dollars that are managed globally have some sort of component with ESG. So it's prevalent in lots of areas, and certainly the applications that we try to enable and empower to the customers really have that theme to it.
Thank you. And Frankie, taking this back to you in terms of, you mentioned the workforce and that this conversation directly impacts the workforce, and maybe a workforce that's maybe not existent today. Can you talk about some of that, how that impacts your business, how that impacts the work you guys are doing in the Sacramento region?
Yeah, I think it's working. There we go. When we look at, SMUD has roughly 2,500 employees, and I've got a lot of focus on the grid side of the house, and traditionally those jobs have not reached underserved communities. So when you talked about DEIB, we have major initiatives internally in DEIB, but it's also a business imperative to keep the money locally as well. So we've worked on targeting under-resourced communities in terms of communication about what is SMUD. If you don't know about it, it's right there, it's your electric provider, but people don't realize what the opportunity is. We had one program that we worked with others on. We worked with the local urban league on, and we did outreach to hundreds of organizations and brought in a cohort of employees. There were two different programs. One, the requirement was think about this, your family income had to be under $20,000. So getting into SMUD and within a few years having a $100,000 job or much higher in a lot of our trades is generational change in families. And I think the other thing is, as we invest going forward, like we're investigating small hydro pump storage. We've our partnership, I don't know if I mentioned that, we ESS. Eric is here, I'm sure somewhere, hopefully. As we change our technologies, as we change our grid, educating all of our community on what's available, and we're really targeting also federal dollars through the different major legislation that have gone through recently. And we're really trying to build that workforce of the future that to be honest, a lot of the jobs at SMUD are easy to fill because it's a good place to work, but there are many of them that are difficult. The problem is not everybody is participating in that going forward. So the initiatives we have locally, we're going to be changing. If you think about, there's lots of internships and apprenticeships in a lot of the office jobs, but there's not really the equivalent in the field jobs, and these are fantastic jobs. So we're building that and hoping to gain federal and state dollars to help us in that. And our partnerships with the DOE, partnerships with our local representatives have been very key to that going forward. So we're expecting to be pretty successful in it. But again, this is a massive education because it's such a change for our community. And we have to, if you think of trust in itself, you're talking about DEIB. We talk about you're not going to get engagement without trust. This is fundamental even to our safety record internally to the company, to have a very trusting, engaged environment. Now, if we can translate to our customers that, and we saw that you talked about customer demand. We had the worst storms we had in our history, back-to-back storms from December 31st to January 17th. And our customers who really love us were pretty tense about our ability to communicate with them. So we have, I have a storm meeting later tomorrow around revamping our storm operations because you can't lose the public trust. Otherwise, we're not going to achieve our zero carbon goals. So we're very focused on all aspects of the business lined up to achieve that zero carbon goal.
Thank you. I'd like to open up to some questions here. And but before that, I want Frank to take a stab at something that's really jumped up. So you've heard of the immense challenge and the amount of inertia needed. So is that forcing you guys to maybe rethink how the investments or ROI is assessed in terms of when you're looking at some of these innovative, whether it's clean tech, software, or hard tech? Is that changing the dynamic of how these things might be measured in terms of return on investment and the runway you might need to see returns on that?
Well, I see that it's becoming a requirement, and there's a growing body of investors, be it VC that maybe historically is focused on software or telecommunications or any number of different verticals within technology. You're seeing more VCs starting to adopt climate impact and net zero orientation. So it's not to say that that hasn't been the case in the past. I'm just saying that there's a growing number of investors and general partners who are being brought on into these VCs that are focusing specifically on climate.
Great. So we have a question there somewhere. Here.
Yeah, I just have a question. As we've seen interest rates increase and we've seen the economy start to do a few different things, are you seeing any of the corporates kind of backing off some of their ESG goals or slowing things down, or is it still moving forward as it was maybe a year or so ago?
I know I can say for Vistra, we are not slowing down at all. In fact, we're putting more resources behind it. and really focusing more on, on the whole transition process. We just acquired a company, or announced it about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that will give us 4 additional nuclear units, 3 different sites. So we're pushing forward with what we're doing. It has not slowed us down at all.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think we saw some utilities push the pause button towards the end of last year when things were just starting to ramp up. There was a lot of uncertainty. But now I think a lot of those programs which were put on pause are being accelerated now. Now it's catch-up time. So we're actually seeing an increase in activity now. Yeah.
We have another question?
It's the last panel of the day.
Well, I'll chime in, but if someone has a question, please feel free to ask. So, how do you see this conversation being very different in 10 years or at all? And Frankie, I'd like to start with you. You've seen the evolution and where we're going. How do you think it's much different?
I just think, Frankie or Frank?
Yeah. I'll start with Frankie, sorry, and then Frank.
We'll try to have different names next time, make it easy for you. In 10 years, hopefully we'll be past zero carbon, and we will have overcome the electrification challenges. It's kind of weird, right, that we're complaining about revenue growth. Not really complaining, but revenue growth brings a lot of electrification, but challenges for our grid that we're hoping to overcome. I mean, in the short term, we have supply chain challenges. We have all sorts of challenges. How do we electrify that local need? And how do we educate customers on managed charging and so on? But I think very specifically for SMUD, our revenue will be a lot higher. Our responsibility will be a lot higher. And hopefully we will have every part of our community participating, like I keep talking about today. But broader in the industry, I don't think everybody's going to let us build transmission lines all over the country. So we're going to have to solve that with long duration storage very locally as well. So I would say, and I'd leave it at this, I remember in 1989 after I moved to the US from Ireland, and I've been married since I've been 18, still married, 42 years, and I'm not 80 years old. I remember my son standing on a diving board, jumping into a pool, and I remember when we were moving here, Sacramento air quality was awful. And I thought, well, that can't be the case, it's California. I'd heard about LA, but anyway, I remember looking past him, and the freeway was behind him, and I could see like dirty air. And I can tell you that the air has been greatly cleaned up in the time I've been there, so I'm very hopeful that in 10 years from now, we're well beyond where we are now. We have not just the utility approach, but we have the whole regional approach to sustainability and zero carbon.
Frank.
I think it's specific to accountability, and that relates to households where you might be compared to your next door neighbor as to how much energy usage you are expending every month. And maybe if you're better than your neighbor, maybe you get preferred rates. And maybe this applies at the corporate level as well.
Heather?
So I don't know if it'll be 10 years, but I know one of the things our chief commercial officer talks about, and I think he's right, once we get the intermittency and the distributed distribution problems handled, we're going to be the generators. We're not going to have giant utilities anymore with power plants. We're going to be producing it in our backyards and on our ceilings and then getting it out to the public. And if you look at everybody and the diversity in this room, you're going to solve that equity problem. We just got to figure out how to get it back onto the grid when it's needed and where to store it when it's not available. And once that happens, I think we're going to have an equitable solution for everybody, and it's just going to be a given, wonderful world that we will live in. 10 years, I don't know, but that's the direction.
And Peter, to close us out.
I'll just, building on the points that Frankie and Heather said about, really the utilities continuing to cost and reliability, that's going to continue to be there, prevalent for the next 10 years. And really what we're seeing is the emergence of the consumer is no longer just paying their bills once a month. I grew up, my father worked for Massachusetts Electric, and it was just about keeping the lights on, period, and that was it. I mean, we're really starting to see how do customers become more empowered. I think everyone has their own personal experiences. Just think of what you do with Uber and Amazon and being able to, order things when you want, do things when you want, 24/7. You don't have to talk to anyone. Really kind of take that initiative to really become part of that whole ecosystem. So I'll just see that trend just continuing, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for the panel today, for talking about a very complex subject, and I really enjoyed the unique, different experiences everyone brought to the table, and hopefully the audience learned something new. The panelists will be here for the rest of the day, so if we can talk with them. And Ricky, we'll hand it back to you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.